It's very encouraging to see so many people here in their own right who just want to get involved, who've probably got plenty to say to us, and there will be time for questions and answers, and also we'll be mingling with you afterwards. So if there are any issues you want to raise with us, please do. Needless to say, if and when we all go to meetings, one of the important things we bring to those meetings is the voice of the people who use the services. We are lay people in the sense we have experience, but we are the lay voice, we are your voice. And the more of you who tell us, the more we can use that to influence and bring to their attention various things that may or may not be working. They don't always have to be bad. Sometimes you may have an experience that's really good, and wouldn't it be nice to say, this works, could we do more of this? So we do want to hear both the good and the bad. Over the past year, we've been visiting different groups and venues in Croydon and talking to people, sometimes where they receive the service, and sometimes going to organisations and actually hearing from their members. And also individuals come into us, they may have a complaint or they may have an issue they want to discuss, and we will try and point them in the right direction. In other words, signposting. Alongside this year, the board recruited several permanent staff who are with us today. And I'm sure you'll note them. They'll have badges on, will they? Yes? Don't let me down, folks. Have you got a badge on? No. Can I point them out to you? Is that all right? And do feel you can go up and talk to them. Yinka. Make yourself known. Anamika.
She's on the front desk.
She's on the front desk. Okay, we've got one on the front desk. Darren on the front desk.
Yeah.
And Gordon. Okay, these are all members of staff. So if you want to speak to the board or speak to the staff, please make yourself known to them. And if you want, for instance, to suggest we come and speak to your group or have an idea, we want you to share those with us. We are moving from being a community interest company to a registered charity, and that is in the pipeline. We reviewed how we were working when we were CIC, and we felt we could do more if we actually became a charity and employed staff on a very regular basis to do the work. And so we as a board made that decision, and that is why we now have permanent staff, and we as the board are now volunteers. We are standing back a little, if you like, and the staff are actually doing the work. Our finances are well controlled. We had a clean audit this year, and they are on pages 18 and 19 of your annual report. However, if any of you want to see the audited accounts, we can provide copies of those too. Just to be quite clear about complaints, although we signpost and we help people, there is an actual complaints service, and that's run by Voiceability. And we're very pleased that Joseph, I don't know if Joseph is here or he's outside with the Voiceability store. He's outside. He's outside. So if you want to find out what Voiceability does, should you have an occasion where you need to raise a complaint, then Joseph from Voiceability is where those are dealt with. It's under a separate contract to Healthwatch Croydon. And looking forward, the job's never done, is it, whatever line of work you're in, so we need to raise our profile even higher. I'm really pleased to see so many of you here today, but given how big Croydon is, we need to get our voices out and we need to engage with more people. We will continue to pursue the interim views, to do interim views in particularly social care homes and nursing homes, because there's a real need, and I think you'll all agree, to catch things before they become a problem. So sometimes we might go into a home and we might see things that aren't necessarily safeguarding, which I'm sure you're all aware of, which we obviously would report on, but where things could be improved. And it's about, again, trying to work with people to make things better. And I think we've been able to be instrumental in that. We will continue to work alongside commissioners and providers in developing what is integrated care. We know it's got to happen. So we're still really trying to make sure we can bring to bear some of the issues that we hear from you as the community. Also, because we now have an analyst, we are able to compare and gather information in a very speedily manner, and this also supports what you say, what we feel, what we hear, but it actually gives us a very firm foundation when we are challenging things. I think one of the biggest things that we as a board collectively feel, and I'm sure many of you do, we want to be involved sooner. If the message is anything, we don't want to be there when the T's are being crossed and the I's are being dotted. We want to try and be there and influence and bring views at an earlier stage, and we are working very hard, I know Charlie is, to make sure we can have that place so that we can be part of the process rather than a bit of an add-on. Sorry? And finally, as with all these occasions, I would like to thank the board for their commitment. Although we are now volunteers and not doing exactly the same as we were when we were a CIC, I think that we still put in a lot and feel quite strongly about the role we're playing in Croydon. I'd like to thank the volunteers who go out and do E&Vs, the volunteers who do outreach, the volunteers who came in a bit early, folded up papers and put them around. Volunteers are a huge part of any organisation, and very much so with Healthwatch, because you are the eyes and ears. I'd like to also thank the community groups who have invited us to come and speak to their members, and I'd like to thank the general public for turning up to hear us today. It wouldn't be right if I didn't thank the staff, otherwise they might sort of not work so hard if I don't. So a big thank you to the staff. Croydon's an enormous borough, and I heard last night at the CVA AGM that it's likely it will increase to 400,000 in the next 2 years. So as a proportion of the people, we're very glad you're here, but there are an awful lot more as well we've got to try and reach. Our thanks to the CCG and CUH and the various departments within the council who support and work with us. We have some very good dialogue going on, particularly the safeguarding team. And we are included in many ways, not always visible, but we are included. I'm sure all of you too have seen the report from CQC on Croydon University Hospital. It's very hot off the press. And yes, there is still an awful lot to do, but there were also some very encouraging signs, and I think one of them that we've often heard, it's not what treatment I get or where I get it, it's how I'm treated. And I think that there was this inclusion in the report about some of the patients said they felt they were spoken to in a kind and gentle way. And I think that is so important when you're providing care and support to people. It's not what you do very often, it's how you do it, so they feel valued and dignified. Right, I think I've done anything. Have I missed anybody out? Anybody feeling if they have had a say? I'd just like to mention a couple of things that are coming up. CUH will be hosting a Croydon conversation on the 27th of October from 6 to 7 p.m. in the Oasis restaurant. Now, the idea of that, I understand, and I've only got this off the website the other day, is for people to speak with members of the trust executives. So if any of you have any issues you want to raise, I would suggest you put that date in your diary. And there is also a Mental Capacity Act and Deprivation of Liberty conference. Now, that sounds a mouthful, but it is about the protection of people who don't necessarily have the ability and the capacity to make their own decisions. So if any of you are working with very vulnerable people who may lack capacity, who need support, it does actually tip on to perhaps people at the end of life where they want decisions made. I would suggest that you book up with this conference, and if anybody wants the details, just see me, because I've got the email address here.